What would you do if you discovered that your own wife had installed her lover to rule your country? In 1808, this actually happened in Spain, and the result was disastrous. An unknown soldier seduced the queen, ascended to absolute power, and opened the doors of the empire to Napoleon Bonaparte. The story you are about to hear is one of the most devastating betrayals in European history. In 1788, Charles IV ascended the throne of Spain, inheriting an empire that dominated half the world. While ruling territories from the Americas to the Pacific, the king preferred hunting and repairing clocks to dealing with politics. Blindly trusting his wife, Maria Luisa of Parma, he failed to perceive the growing danger within his own palace. She was intelligent, ambitious, and deeply dissatisfied. Maria Luisa desired real power, influence, and excitement. In 1788, she met Manuel Godoy, a 21-year-old soldier newly arrived in the Royal Guard. Young, handsome, and charismatic, he was everything the aging court lacked. What began with discreet glances quickly transformed into a relationship that would change the destiny of the country. In just 4 years, Godoy rose from a simple guard to Prime Minister of Spain, the fastest ascent in European history. His power stemmed from the Queen's bedroom, and all of Europe was buzzing with the scandal. Most shockingly, Charles IV knew everything and accepted it, in a silence that outraged his subjects and tarnished the honor of the monarchy. While the king hunted and the queen plotted, Godoy ruled arrogantly. Nobles gnashed their teeth in hatred, but were powerless before the queen's favorite. However, there was someone whose fury surpassed that of all. Fernando, the crown prince, who saw an intruder destroying the dignity of his family and swore revenge. Year after year, Fernando watched Godoy govern the country that should have been his. He gathered disgruntled nobles and began to conspire. But his youthful rebellion would be used by someone even more dangerous, a Corsican general who dreamed of dominating all of Europe. On the other side of the Pyrenees, Napoleon Bonaparte observed everything with predatory attention. For Napoleon, Spain was a rich empire ruled by a weak king, an ambitious lover, and a resentful prince. Perfect recipe for his conquest strategy. The French emperor saw a rare opportunity in this family chaos. When his spies confirmed the internal conflict, Napoleon decided to execute his plan. Astute, Napoleon offered Godoy a grand deal to allow French troops to cross Spain towards Portugal. In exchange, France promised to divide Portuguese territory with Spain. Blinded by ambition, Godoy signed the Treaty of Fontainebleau without realizing that he was handing his country over to the most dangerous conqueror of the century. French troops entered Spain in November 1807, supposedly heading towards Portugal. But it soon became clear that they had no intention of leaving. They occupied cities, fortresses, and roads, behaving as if they owned the territory. By March 1808, 100,000 French soldiers already controlled vital points in Spain. Only then did Godoy realize his fatal mistake. The outraged population first turned against Godoy. On March 17th, a crowd surrounded the Aranjuez palace demanding his head. The most powerful man in Spain had to hide wrapped in a carpet for 36 hours. When he was found, he was dirty, desperate, and humiliated. His downfall was as swift as his rise. In the chaos, Ferdinand forced his father to abdicate in his favor. For a few days he became Ferdinand VII, celebrated as a liberator, but the young prince didn't realize he was entering Napoleon's game. The emperor invited him, along with Charles IV, to a diplomatic mediation in France, a carefully set trap. In Bayonne, Napoleon separated father and son and initiated one of the greatest humiliations in history. He forced Ferdinand to return the crown to his father under threat of imprisonment. Then, he forced Charles IV to hand it over not to his son, but to Napoleon himself. In a few days, a centuries-old dynasty was destroyed like a toy in the hands of the emperor. Napoleon didn't even want the throne. He simply placed his brother Joseph Bonaparte as king of Spain, as if distributing family gifts. A Frenchman on the throne who unified the nation and conquered America. The humiliation was total. The door that Godoy had opened for the French was now wide open, and Spain would pay dearly. But Napoleon made a fatal mistake. He underestimated the Spanish people. On May 2nd, 1808, Madrid erupted in revolt. Civilians armed with knives, stones, and scissors attacked the most powerful army in the world. The repression was brutal, but the bloodshed ignited a flame that would never be extinguished. The violence of that day spread through the streets like wildfire. Entire families witnessed French soldiers dragging civilians, executing innocents, and setting houses ablaze. The initial shock transformed into deep hatred, and witnesses swore they would never forget the barbarity they had witnessed in Madrid. The city, suffocated by terror, was awakening to war. The echo of the Madrid uprising spread rapidly throughout Spain, reaching villages, monasteries, and mountains. Peasants, artisans, and priests understood that there was no turning back. The fight for the nation as survival had begun. Within weeks, rebellions erupted in various provinces, uniting the country under a single cry of resistance. The flame lit in Madrid had become a national conflagration. The revolt spread and sparked the War of Independence, which would last 6 years. Modern guerrilla warfare was born. Peasants ambushed French troops and disappeared into the mountains. Accustomed to gigantic battles, Napoleon watched his army bleed before invisible enemies. Spain became the Spanish tumor that corroded his empire. While the country burned, Charles IV and Marie Louise lived comfortably in France, supported by Napoleon, alongside their inseparable Godoy. Ferdinand VII, meanwhile, spent 6 years imprisoned in a French castle. The family that should have defended the country was distraught and completely useless. While its people died for freedom, the war had global effects that completely transcended Spain's borders. While the country burned with resistance against the French, its overseas territories watched the metropolis weakened and politically crumbling. For the first time in centuries, the empire that commanded the oceans seemed vulnerable. This fragility ignited movements that had been maturing for decades. The American colonies, realizing that Spain was occupied, divided, and incapable of governing, began their independence processes. Between 1810 and 1825, a wave of revolutions spread from north to south. Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Argentina, and Chile broke their ties with the crown. The loss of these territories meant the collapse of the wealth that had sustained Spain since the 16th century. Thus, the empire where the sun never set began to crumble slowly, piece by piece, until it became a shadow of its former self. The entire imperial structure collapsed under the weight of internal errors. The reckless ambition of a queen, the arrogance of her favorite, and the political weakness that paved the way for the French invasion. The global empire was destroyed by decisions made within a single palace. In 1814, after the expulsion of the French, Ferdinand VII returned as El Decido, the desired one. But he soon proved to be a vengeful tyrant, abolishing the liberal constitution and establishing a brutal absolutist regime. The people who had fought for him discovered that they had liberated not a hero, but a despot. Godoy ended his life, poor, forgotten, and far from the Spain he helped to destroy. Charles IV and Maria Luisa died in exile, tainted by scandal. Ferdinand reigned until 1833, leaving a legacy of instability and hatred. The family that should have protected the empire was primarily responsible for its downfall. The betrayal that destroyed the Spanish monarchy shows how empires fall when leaders place personal desires above duty. An ambitious soldier, a bored queen, a weak king, and a vengeful prince created the perfect chaos that Napoleon needed to conquer an entire nation. And so, the empire where the sun never set plunged into shadows from which it never fully emerged.